Well, it wasn't meant to be, and we're very friendly with her. She's a good woman, but the cartels are running Mexico. She's not running Mexico. The cartels are running Mexico. And we could be politically correct and be nice and say, oh, yes, she is. No, she's very, she's very frightened of the cartels. They're running Mexico. And I've asked her numerous times, would you like us to take out the cartels? No, Mr. President. No, please. So we have to do something.
So I want to talk about the crisis over in Mexico today, because we basically now have a full-blown civil war now erupting between the Mexican government and the cartel in the Puerto Vallarta area. And at the current moment, there is no indication the Mexican government has any control whatsoever. You could make the case they are outgunned. The situation appears to be even spilling close to the U.S. border. Countless U.S. and Canadian citizens are reporting being trapped in their hotels because they can't get a taxi to the airport since the roads are too dangerous. The airports are closed. Even major airports in the United States, like the El Paso one, have closed down for the next 10 days. And so, yes, this is a very serious situation. It's a total civil crisis. And unfortunately, I think it is a strong vindication of many of the arguments we've made about Mexico and even the greater region here over the past couple of months. To put it frankly, the chickens have come home to roost, right? Because this stands as yet more proof, first of all, that Mexico absolutely is a narco-state. The cartels really are in charge. And no, contrary to what woke liberal Americans have tried to say, they're not just street gangs. They are very serious, heavily armed, paramilitary, parapolitical organizations that absolutely have the real control in Mexico. Okay, we know that the Mexican government is simply a puppet of the cartel, and that is provable by the fact that the moment the Mexican government even remotely tries to assert any true control, the cartels are reminding them right now of who's actually in charge. And secondly, as it pertains to the situation in the United States, okay, what consequences are we now facing thanks to the instability of our closest neighbor? Our citizens are trapped, okay, in a potentially life-threatening situation. They're more or less being held hostage. Even airports in this country have to close. The violence, the chaos is spreading towards our southern border. And what have I said for the longest time? If you're going to justify any CIA or military interventions in other countries, then it should be of the utmost serious importance to us that not just countries in our own hemisphere, but directly on our own border are failed states that are run by violent criminal organizations. And yes, that absolutely affects us in our day-to-day lives, not just because the cartels are obviously killing Americans, as we well know, but even secondly, think about the refugee, quote-unquote, crisis that you could argue is partially caused at our own southern border, right, by this issue of cartel violence. And by the way, let's not forget that the cartels are the ones entirely sponsoring it. Nobody crosses the southern border without being brokered by the cartel. It's their human trafficking operation. They're not just asylum seekers. They're human trafficking victims of the Mexican cartel. So this is all to say, yes, that as it pertains to recent arguments that Trump had with the Mexican president about, hey, maybe we should do something. Maybe you should actually accept U.S. help and get your act together and no longer be a failing state. Narco President Claudia Sheinbaum, of course, refused. She claimed she could handle the situation herself. Clearly, she cannot. And so now I guess the question is it time? Is it time for America to... I'm not saying we have to go kidnap the president, because maybe that's not the most effective strategy, but is it time for America to start actually dedicating military resources to fighting the terrorist organization that is the single biggest threat to all of us in our daily lives? Well, let's talk about that here today, guys. We'll explain this whole situation. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. We greatly appreciate the support, but it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And that said, take a listen here for the brief details on what's going on right now in Mexico.
But more on the breaking news out of Mexico. The U.S. Embassy issuing a shelter-in-place order for Americans in areas around Mexico City and the resort town of Puerto Vallarta, after the Mexican army says it killed a prominent cartel kingpin known as El Mencho. You're looking at some of the response, apparently, of the cartel members who have been torching vehicles and even airplanes in the Guadalajara area. Let's bring in Lucas Tomlinson from the White House. Lucas.
Well, good afternoon, John. So far, there's been no reaction from the White House about the series of ongoing gun battles that we are witnessing in Mexico after, as you mentioned, the drug kingpin and cartel leader El Mencho was killed by Mexican forces. We've heard from the Pentagon that the Joint Interagency Task Force Counter Cartel did assist Mexican forces, not likely with boots on the ground, John, but with intelligence sharing. But after El Mencho has been killed, we're seeing a series of warfare, frankly, going on across Mexico. In Puerto Vallarta, in Guadalajara, we saw images from the airport. And of course, thousands of American tourists visit Mexico throughout the year, certainly during the winter months in the United States. And right now, the State Department is warning all Americans in Mexico to shelter in place, particularly in Puerto Vallarta and the Guadalajara area. But after El Mencho is killed, we're seeing rival cartels engaging in gun battles throughout the day. We're seeing videos of Mexican special forces engaging in Mexican police on the streets. We're seeing a lot of iPhone video, as you can see here on the screen, some of the aftermath, buses destroyed, airports being targeted, and really a lot of chaos throughout multiple states across Mexico, John.
Yeah, so a couple of key takeaways. First and foremost, you have the woke fantasy of Mexico, where left-wing hero Claudia Sheinbaum is really in charge and she cares about our people and blah, blah, blah. And then you have the reality, which is that Mexico is a violent narco-state run by terrorists. As a matter of fact, take a look as one example of this clip from the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation that was promoting travel to Mexico over America due to their Trump derangement syndrome. And, well, in retrospect, how stupid do they look encouraging their own people to engage in tourism in this obviously violent and unstable country?
Charles Burt and Marilee Mollard are getting advice from their travel agent on where to travel this winter.
So, have you guys decided on where you would like to go?
Well, on the bucket list is Puerto Vallarta.
The Manitoba couple usually spends weeks or even months at a trailer park in Westlaco, Texas, but not this year.
Since the election of Trump and the insults that he placed on our country, 51st date and all of that garbage, we decided that, no, we're not going to spend money down there.
I mean, you can't make that up. It's hard to believe that's even a real video. But not only are they boycotting Trump in America for political reasons, okay, fine. Their alternative choice, the woke-approved choice, is literally Puerto Vallarta, the part of Mexico that is engulfed in civil war right now. You know? Imagine that ad from the travel agency. Are you boycotting America for political reasons this year? Why not take a trip to Mogadishu, Somalia? You know, it's like, seriously? Now, here's hoping that, you know, they're not there right now and they're back in Canada realizing, oh, we made a mistake, and, you know, they learned the easy way, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, just straight up, okay? Can we stop freaking lying about this? Can we stop pretending as if, Mexico is this lovely, wonderful place? I mean, I understand there's a lot of appeal to it. You know, there's a lot of reason that tourists might want to go there, but we also shouldn't be naive and say, look, it's a violent narco state. No, Claudia Sheinbaum's not in charge. No, they're not all just singing Kumbaya south of the border. And you wonder why, for example, Trump warns us so much about the people pouring over the southern border. It's because there's a civil war going on. Do you understand? There's the freaking civil war happening south of the border, okay, between a government in name and a bunch of terrorist organizations. And yeah, I don't think it was very smart that Joe Biden just said, oh, you know, let's not secure anything. Let's have them all walk across, okay? So get real, on one hand. Secondly, though, I do want to describe the sort of situation that actually led up to this, because you might have heard the details about the strike, and it sounds a little bit confusing. So the Mexican army took out one of the top leaders of a cartel using U.S. intelligence and U.S. help. So you might say, oh, how does that vindicate Trump? Doesn't it seem like it's actually Trump's fault that this is all happening? Well, let me explain this, okay? So on one hand, yes, the Mexican military killed this guy who's El Mencho, the leader of the cartel Jalisco Nueva Generation in Mexico. And clearly, as you can tell, the cartel in response is hyper-militarized, and they're giving the government a super hard time over it. Now, this might seem a little bit confusing because Claudia Sheinbaum, of course, is the very left-wing president who got elected in Mexico off of claiming that she would not use military force against the cartel. And so this might seem like a big contradiction. I'll explain it in a second, but just understand, right? This is the left-wing president of Mexico who has refused U.S. support, refused previously to use military force against the cartel, and then the moment she tries to do a show of force, it clearly is not going all that well. Okay?
Regresar a la guerra contra el narco no es opción. No es opción. Primero, porque está fuera del marco de la ley. Todos estos de la derecha que se llenan la boca de las palabras Estado de Derecho y defienden la guerra contra el narco, pues la guerra contra el narco está fuera de la ley, porque como lo dije o lo he dicho en varias ocasiones, es permiso para matar, sin ningún juicio. Y eso en México nadie o muy poquitos están de acuerdo. Está fuera del marco de la ley. Y segundo, no sirvió de nada más que para aumentar los homicidios en México y el nivel de violencia. Entonces, estos llamados autoritarios, porque son autoritarios, es ir hacia el fascismo.
Yeah, so let us not forget, that is the far-left socialist president of Mexico. She is a puppet of the cartel. She got elected by advocating that it was fascist and authoritarian to actually use force against the narcos, and her policy thus far has been to essentially hand over total control of Mexican governmental power to the cartels who basically were running it all along. But hey, you know, let's be even more direct about that. Narcos cartels have whatever you want over our country. Except when the Trump administration was inaugurated in 2025, I'm not sure if you've noticed based on their Latin America policy, but this is not something that he remotely has been willing to tolerate. As a matter of fact, you might remember simultaneously, amidst all of the Venezuela stuff happening, Trump repeatedly floated and even threatened the idea that if necessary, we're going to use U.S. military against the cartels, not just in the ocean, but on land, which means what? If we need to go into Mexico and wipe out the paramilitary terrorist organizations that are threatening and killing citizens of our country, we might have to do that, which I would argue is what basically elicited this failed response, this attempt to rectify that by leftist idiot Claudia Sheinbaum, and it didn't work out. We'll explain what we mean by that in a second. But first, let's just remember this is what Trump had to say.
So Mexico is saying that I offered to send U.S. troops into Mexico to take care of the cartel. She wants to know, is that true? Do you think I'm going to answer that question?
That's why I'm asking. We'll see.
I will answer it. It's true. Absolutely. Because they are horrible people that have been killing people left and right, they've made a fortune on selling drugs and destroying our people. We lost 300,000 people last year to fentanyl and drugs. They're bad news. Yeah, that's true. If Mexico wanted help with the cartels, we would be honored to go in.
Right, so to basically explain this whole situation, what happened is that the Trump administration went to Claudia Sheinbaum in Mexico and said, hey, look, your cartel problem is out of control. We're offering, and even to a sense threatening, to use U.S. military force to take out the cartels and deal with the situation. The Sheinbaum administration, obviously, because they're, leftist and anti-imperialist and all this stuff, but understanding to some degree they need to work with the United States, basically said, no, we don't want U.S. military in Mexico. That gives us bad memories or whatever. Not going to happen, but look, we'll do something on our own. So that's basically what Sheinbaum did here by taking out this cartel leader, right? Basically trying to show or save face with the Trump administration by saying, hey, look, our government can handle it ourselves. No need for U.S. military. No need for substantial U.S. help. Our military's got it. Don't worry. We don't need, Trump is exaggerating this problem, right? And so what happens next? What happens next is the government, yes, successfully takes out a cartel member using U.S. intelligence, but they don't want U.S. boots on the ground. They don't want serious help. Okay. But then the day after, what comes next? What comes next is that the cartels, angry over this fact, because usually no one's taking them out, no one's holding them accountable, start a revolt against the government. And as you can clearly see by how heavily armed and well-resourced and well-equipped the cartels actually are, If the cartels choose to revolt against the government at the very least is going to have a very hard time dealing with the situation, which is to say what? Why am I bringing all this up? Because what Claudia Sheinbaum just proved is that Trump was right all along. The Mexican government is not able to control the cartel. They were never going to have the resources to deal with this situation. And it would have been smart for the US government all along to be saying, okay, we're going to help you out. And after all, if it is true that Mexico has no control over the situation, if it's true that Mexico is a narco-state where the cartels are outgunning the government, and it's directly affecting US citizens and US borders, then in that case, I don't even think it is imperialistic anymore. It's actually just self-defense to say, it's time for America to do something about this, right? This foreign policy doctrine for so many decades of caring about nonsense halfway around the world, but not caring about, again, basically a civil war happening right on our own borders has always been silly to me. And perhaps it might be long past time for a correction of that policy. But if you're still not convinced, I'll bring you this story of apparently Californians now trapped as the cartel unleashes hell near the U.S. border over the killing of this very drug kingpin, which I repeat was basically botched by the Sheinbaum administration. Why? Because the Mexican government was never ready to deal with this situation, and they were very dumb for saying that the U.S. military shouldn't be helping out. All right, Californians have been trapped in Mexico as cartel violence engulfed a popular tourist city and spilled over the U.S. border. Carnage did spread up the West Coast through the country on Sunday, with reports of attacks getting closer to the states in Baja California, while gunfire erupted at the Guadalajara International Airport. Now, you see that right now, among those trapped in Puerto Vallarta were people like Katie Holloman, who had been on the way to the airport when she was suddenly told that she needs to stay at the hotel. Saying here, quote, "We were told to shelter in place right now. We need to stay in the hotel. It was safer here, but it is not safe to travel at the airport. The road is closed due to the cartel. There's no flights going out of the airport to the States. We've rescheduled them for tomorrow afternoon, hoping we can make it home. Yeah, who knows where that's going to go. Just going to pray we make it tomorrow. This is unprecedented here. The hotel staff have been saying this has never happened before." So just keep that in mind too. People might say, oh, it's just normal gang violence. No, that's not normal gang violence, okay? Petty street gangs shooting each other or something does not shut down the infrastructure of entire major cities. It doesn't shut down international airports. You know what does? Civil war, which is exactly what this is. And we should be honest about that label, right? So there you have that. Many others are reporting similar stories. Daniel Smith from Palm Springs says, "We're evacuating the building. Propane tanks have exploded, hoping the building doesn't catch on fire." So, even the shelter in place warning from the U.S. State Department in that case might not always be able to stay in place because, the cartels are basically angry right now. They're lashing out. Again, the government cannot control the situation. I don't know if this is controversial or whatever to say, but if you ask me right now, this should be the top priority of the Department of War, Forget about Iran for a bit, okay? I would actually say U.S. resources should be pulled out of the Middle East to go, first of all, rescue our citizens, okay? This whole situation of, we don't want to piss off Mexico, diplomatic relations, so we're going to hope Mexico figures it out. No, our citizens are being held hostage right now in these cities, okay? You want to use Delta Force for anything? How about Delta Force should be used to go rescue our freaking citizens? You want to use military, by the way, for anything? There's a civil war going on in this freaking country. If the CIA was ever going to intervene, if the U.S. military was going to intervene, now it's the case right now. I'm not saying there's not pressing concerns in the Middle East, okay? But much like the argument I made after the Venezuela raid, the issues in our hemisphere should come first. And yes, as it pertains to Mexico, that's arguably even more important to Venezuela, considering our citizens are hostage there right now. And, I would guess that likely the cartel probably won't be inclined to touch American citizens because they want to try to keep the U.S. out and they don't want to give them a reason. But you don't know that for sure. There's no guarantee this doesn't just become like a Benghazi situation, except it's not in North Africa. It's over right here in Mexico. So, just something to consider about all of that. I mean, I've been very hawkish on Latin American foreign policy for a very long time. It's been very clear to me that, this is something that needs to be done, but especially now that the Mexican government has proven there's nothing they can do to control it. You have U.S. citizens trapped there. The violence is spilling to our border. We're having to close the El Paso airport. Our own airports have to be closed because of this freaking civil war. And, we're just treating it as, oh, that's Mexico. It's just normal cartel violence. It's not normal cartel violence, right? You got to do something about this. So, I don't know. That's just me. That said, guys, feel free to let me know your thoughts on the situation in the comment section down below on all of this. But be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.